He was India's first rock star, but he's still the most popular. Today, of course, he's an icon and his name is a symbol. But now's your chance to get to meet the man behind the legend as I introduce you to Remo Fernandes. Welcome to the program, Remo.
Hi, Karan. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, in fact, Remo Fernandes is just the short form of your name. What's the full version?
Well, it's not the short form. It's two of my many names. All my names are Luís Remo de Maria Bernardo Fernandes.
Wow. Isn't it a paradox that with a name like that, you should actually be the voice that is the singer of some of the biggest Hindi songs like Hamma Hamma and Pyar To Hona Hi Tha?
Well, not really, Karan. It's like, I mean, not any more of a paradox than somebody with a name like, Karan Thapar doing an English show for the BBC. It's the world has become one big village now. It's, world music. All barriers are broken.
I know
and
that
India is this great tapestry of different cultures, different.
Now, I know that you're completely fluent in Portuguese, Konkani, French, and English, but just how good is your Hindi?
पर हिंदी बहुत शुद्ध है गोवा में हम तो प्यार तो होने ता बोलते हैं हम
So when you were singing, for instance, Hamma Hamma or Pyar To Hona Hi Tha, did you have any problem with the accent?
Well, always do, yes, always do, and it's getting better all the time. But always do because, when you live in a place like Hindi, you don't actually grasp, the fact that there's a whole country, or 90% of the country out there where people don't, speak Hindi at all. I mean, it's a very strange paradox. That's the paradox.
So what were you saying, Pyar To Hona Hi Tha?
Yeah, and I think that, and actually they always have the, lyric writer in the studio when I'm recording, in order to correct the pronunciations whenever they go really haywire. But this is something that they purposely didn't correct, and I didn't even realize it, and I think they did it on purpose because they found it cute. I had the word, but I think they found it cute, and I think...
Sing the line for me, let's hear what it sounds like.
I need music, but... Pyar to hona hi tha ta.
Let's go back to the very beginning of the Remo Fernandes story. For the first 8 years of your life, you were an only child. Were you terribly spoiled?
I wasn't spoiled. Well, if left only to my father's devices, maybe I would have been spoiled, because he was the type who would, go out and buy anything I wanted. I showed interest. Banjo one day, he would go out and buy me a banjo. The next day I wanted to play the accordion. He would go out and buy me the accordion. But my mother, I think, was the sobering factor. And I think both of them, there's a difference between, between being spoiled and being, overprotected. And the reason why I was overprotected was because, I had a brother who was born 8 years before me, and he died at childbirth. And then for 8 years, my parents didn't have a child, so when I was born, it was like, every little temperature or cold, and they would rush me to the hospital. So it was more of an overprotective kind of an attitude rather than spoiling,
There's a lovely story that once your father saw you crying because you had a problem with your mouth organ. Do you remember it?
Yes, I remember. My dad had bought me a mouth organ, and then he went off, to work, and then when he came back in the afternoon, he found me sitting under a bed and crying, with the mouth organ. And he was very musically minded himself, so he asked me what was the problem, and I told him that I was trying to play my favorite tune, which I remember was a blue tango. And I was crying because I couldn't get a particular note. And because he was musically minded, he understood that what I needed was a mouth organ with a button, which would give the sharps and the flats, in the scale. And so he went out and he bought me a mouth organ with a button, which was, a more professional kind of mouth organ. And then I was very happy. I could get the note I wanted.
Was there a sense in which your father was perhaps living his own dreams through you?
Absolutely, in many ways, yes. Because his father was a doctor who thought that being a musician was a waste of time because one ended up as an alcoholic or a pauper or both, which was very true in those days. And so he didn't, and so my grandfather didn't allow my father to pursue music, And my father used to, pick up instruments, very stealthily at your cousins' places and at friends' places. And then when he saw this, tendency in me, he encouraged it like crazy. So I suppose, yes, he was living it through me.
The amazing thing was your first public performance was at the age of 5.
On stage, yes.
You dedicated the song to your mother. What was it?
It was a Portuguese song called Minha Mãezinha Querida, which means my darling mother. And I recorded it many years later, because I couldn't find it in record shops anymore.
In your second album?
Yes, in my second album. You've really done your homework, haven't you?
What does it sound like, though? Remind us, because it's a beautiful number, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's Minha mãezinha querida, mãezinha do coração, adorarei toda a vida com grande devoção. É essa tua valsinha, foste a inspiração. Canto, querida mãezinha, a tua canção. And that's the way it goes.
You know, the amazing thing is you had the courage at the age of 5 to sing in public, and yet I'm told you were quite a shy child at school.
Absolutely shy, and I still am sometimes. Absolutely
No one would
shy,
believe it. Absolutely no one would believe it.
Well, yeah, but somehow on stage it just goes away. You know, the shyness goes away.
Except when you were acting in a play in school. It didn't go away then, did it? Do you remember what happened?
Yes, I remember. There was this play, and I wanted to take part in it, so my dad took me to the rehearsal, and the teacher said, fine, okay, you want me to try him out for the part, okay. So the first thing you've got to do, and the first scene I had to act out was to run after a little girl. It was supposed to be in a park, and she had this ring, and she was strolling around, or she was running around.
And little
around,
Remo couldn't run behind the girl?
I couldn't run behind a girl.
But the only time in your life you couldn't have done it?
The only time in my life I couldn't have done it, and I haven't stopped doing it since. At least that's what my wife and my mother tell me. But I couldn't do it, and I think they actually killed a great actor's career.
The other amazing thing I'm told is that when you were young, you used to stammer. Is that true?
Well, I still stammer, very often, but I think I've learned the tricks of how to hide it, and again, it's something which absolutely disappears on stage. And even at that time, you know, when I sang, I never ever stammered. You know, with the result that I only sang on stage. I never ever spoke a word on stage, except for, you know, muttering thank you at the end of applause, maybe. I never ever spoke, but now I talk a lot. A lot of my act is interaction.
You know, you make it sound as if Remo on stage is a different person. Do you like an audience? Does it bring the best out of you?
I think, I don't know, a lot of people say that I am a different person on stage. You know, to me, it's just an extension of who I am. It's like, I don't know, on stage, off stage, it's an extension in some ways, but in some ways it is, you're living out a fantasy, you know, once you climb up on that stage, you know, you become someone that you know, cannot be in your private life.
And is that the fun of being on stage?
Absolutely, yeah.
That you move into another world?
Yeah, you move into another world, and absolutely, yeah. That's the fun of.
It all began, in a sense, didn't it, singing professionally when you moved to Bombay? You went there supposedly to a degree in architecture, but you ended up singing with a pretty well-known rock group called the Savages.
Yes, I did that. But before that, I already had my groups in Goa. So it was not, you know, playing with the Savages that made me, you know, decide to take up music as a profession. You know, what really made me decide that was meeting a young French guitarist who had hitchhiked all the way from Paris to Goa, and he was a classical guitarist, and he's the first, you know, youth I met from the West, you know, with whom I really became friends, and I came to know about a different lifestyle altogether. It was, you know, we are so obsessed with a proper, you know, career and job, and once we get a steady job, we don't let go. Whereas over there, you know, the youth was just working for 6 months and then taking off and then going back and work. So the whole...
So it was the freedom of this lifestyle that attracted you?
Yeah, and it made me see that what I really wanted to do in life was music, and why was I, you know, doing architecture?
When you made this decision and gave up architecture, you finished your degree.
I didn't
you finished
give it
your
up,
degree,
yeah.
but you never practiced.
No.
Was your father upset?
No, he wasn't. He was amazing. In retrospect, I realized that he was amazing, you know, because he had a gold spot, you know, he had a cold drink factory in Goa. He had the gold spot factory, so he thought that I would take over that. And then one day he asked me, would you like to take over this factory? And I said, no, I want to be an architect. And I joined architecture, and I didn't even realize, I didn't even really see him doing it, but he sold off the factory and he went into real estate.
And then you decided not to be an architect?
And then I finished architecture and I said, no, I want to be a musician. And that man never said a word. He never said, but I did all this for you. So I didn't even realize he had done it for me. And then he said, fine, you know, do exactly what you like.
In fact, it wasn't even as simple as that, because after you decided you wanted to go into music, you took off for Europe for 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's
what did you do there?
I hitchhiked around 8 countries in those 2.5 years. I played the guitar in underground stations.
So you were busking?
I was busking. I was passing my hat around in the cafes, on the terraces, on the pedestrian streets in Italy, in Spain, Portugal, you know.
You know, people say...
And, you know, I was traveling with a haversack and a tent. In the night, I would, you know, hitch the tent.
People say busking is fun, but it must have been pretty tough.
No, I didn't find it tough. Anything is fun when you love doing it, you know. And I don't know, luckily I was able to always, you know, have enough to eat well, you know, buy a nice bottle of wine and see these wonderful places, visit these fabulous museums. And
they say that Remo's great ability is that he has an instant presence and he knows how to project his voice. Did some of that come from simply busking?
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me tell you one thing, Karan, because, you know, when you're singing at a concert, it's like people have paid money to come and listen to you, so that's already half the battle won, you know. And if you're standing at a footpath and you're trying to attract not just attention, but a few coins and hopefully a few notes from people who haven't gone out there on that footpath to listen to you. They've gone out there to get from point A to point B to their office or to the shopping mall or whatever. And you've got to, you know, grab their attention and make them part with their money. So, you know, that really taught me how to project my voice, my presence and stuff. I realized that that was a great school.
It added an extra element to your ability to perform on stage.
Absolutely.
The amazing thing is today Remo is such a big name. And yet when you came back to Goa, ready to sing, wanting to make a career out of music, the recording companies wouldn't have you. What was the problem?
Well, at that time it was the great craze for Hindi disco. You know, Kurbani had just come out, so all that they wanted to sign was Hindi disco. And here I wanted to do English songs about India, you know, songs like Graham Bell, songs like, you know, Hello Rajiv Gandhi, all the songs which were very much about India, but in English. And I think the record companies didn't have the far-sightedness to see that there was an audience for this kind of music here in India.
They actually thought that an Indian singing in English wouldn't sell.
No, wouldn't sell.
And they didn't realize that they were actually letting go what was a prized property.
Well, and it happens all the time. I took consolation in the fact that the Beatles were rejected by a whole lot of record companies as well in England. And, you know, so I started my own little recording studio, you know, from the savings.
You literally put it together entirely yourself?
Yeah, entirely myself.
Remo, let's take a break there. I want to come back in part 2 and talk about this incredible career that you did all on your own. Okay. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. Stick with us. Welcome back. My guest is Remo Fernandes. We ended part 1, Remo, talking about how the record companies were nervous to touch you when you first came back to this country. So just how difficult was it to bring out your first 2 albums?
Well, it wasn't difficult because when you do something you love doing, nothing is difficult. It's just fun and it's joy, you know. But what I had to do is, I started off playing as a hotel musician, and from my savings I bought myself a small little 4-track, you know, multi-track recorder, and I recorded my first albums on that. And I got
Did you do the marketing and the...
I did everything, but everything. I did the recording, the mixing, all right, but then I also designed the covers. I got them printed. I went to the printer, checked the colors. Then I got them manufactured in Bombay. I made 1,000 copies, and then on my little scooter, I went to each record shop in Goa and distributed them and said, here, keep these. I designed the ads, put them in the newspaper. I did everything, and that was a great school.
And at no point were you nervous?
No.
You were confident that you could do it all?
No, I mean, I wasn't confident because I didn't know that I could do it, but it was just something that I was dying to do. I wanted to do it. It was...
But you know, in a way, it's become a habit with you, because last year when you did the video for Cyber Fiber, I gather once again you did everything from camera, lights, to editing, animation, and graphics.
Yeah, somehow I tend to do that. Then I tend to do it all myself.
Is that because you're a perfectionist, or because you've stopped trusting other people?
It's partly, I mean, it's partly the fact that I'm a perfectionist. And it's also because I think I know exactly how I want, you know, my song to sound and how I want my video to look. And of course, if I ask somebody else to do it for me or to have a say in it, I mean, it might also be very good, but it'll be his way, and I want it my way.
Now, one of the most memorable things about your music, particularly when you do it your way, is that there seems to be a large space there for what might be called protest or social messages or even satire. Is that, in a sense, the real Remo voice?
Well, that's one of the real Remo voices. You know, a part of us, for example, you know, wakes up in the morning and reads the papers and says and does formulate thoughts and passes comments about the political scene in the country. Another part of us wants to go out and party. A third part of us falls in love and feels romantic. So all those are parts of me. So I write a protest song, you know, when I'm feeling very protestive, if that's a word.
But you know, your protest really hit on the nail. I mean, for instance, Ode to Graham Bell was a protest against the state of the telephone industry.
Yeah.
Where did the idea come from?
Well, from the fact that the phones didn't work. I had just spent 2.5 years in Europe. I came back and then to see the phones are still not working here when the rest of the world is doing such amazing things over the phone, it's like, you know, unfortunately the phones work better in India. No, so you know, and my song is not relevant anymore.
But the chorus was absolutely delightful, wasn't it? Do you remember it?
Well, it was intentionally very simplistic. It was very, you know, nursery rhyme kind of a chorus. I think it went, Graham Bell, you're dead and it's just as well. 'Cause if you saw the phones in India, you'd jump into a well. You know, lyrics like that.
One of your most famous protests was a song called Hello Rajiv Gandhi. You sang it when Rajiv and Sonia came to Goa.
Yeah, that's right.
How did they react?
They loved the song. Rajiv came backstage and took the cassette and, you know, he loved it. But then a certain section of the press in Goa, you know, who had a bone to pick with me, because of a previous song I'd written about them, you know, started, you know, this campaign against me, a very systematic campaign where, you know, there would be articles against me every single day on the papers. And I saw this guy, you know, the editor of the newspaper. I saw what he was trying to do because, you know, he had ruined, you know, the lives of a few people that way, of a few politicians that way in Goa, you know, who I think the owners of the newspaper couldn't see eye to eye with or something like that. So at the end of 2 weeks of those articles, I mean, I just took the first cutting and I sent it to Rajiv. And then here was a pop singer sending, you know, like writing to the Prime Minister of the country. And I was wondering whether I would get an answer. But at the same time, something about Rajiv told me that if he received, you know, my letter, he would write back to me. And apparently he did, because 2 weeks later there was, you know, the letter from the Prime Minister of India addressed to a pop musician, you know, with, you know, and the Prime Minister's official seal lying at my doorstep, you know, saying that he had loved the song and that there was no offense, you know, meant or taken in the song at all.
The amazing thing is, a couple of years later, you did it with one of his successors, Narasimha Rao. You wrote a song called Don't Kick Up the Row.
Yeah, that's right.
Was he as sporting?
Absolutely, yeah. He wrote back saying, you know, because I wrote to him saying that the song, again, you know, didn't intend any disrespect to him, and he wrote back saying, oh, please don't feel any remorse. You know, he played with my name like I'd played with his. You know, he made it Remo, R-S-E.
He punned on Remo and us. But you know, it's not always been politicians that you've targeted, if I can so put it. Occasionally you've also used your music to send messages to the young. For instance, your first Hindi album, O Meri Muni, had a very different target audience.
Yes, it did, yes.
There's a story behind that particular album, isn't there?
Well, O Meri Muni was, I mean, I noticed, you know, the beginnings of a sexual liberation in India, and I saw that the liberation was starting with the very young, and unfortunately for them, I mean, it's a dangerous time to be, you know, sexually liberated with AIDS and with other dangers like that, you know. And
so you were cautioning them?
Yeah, I was cautioning them.
But you weren't scared that perhaps just this time round you might be going against the grain?
I didn't care. I thought of that. I thought of that danger because, after all, you know, pop songs are supposed to reach out to the youth and give them what they want. And here I was telling them something that maybe they wouldn't really like to hear. But I didn't care. I said, you know, this is what I feel. And
the message was important.
The message was important. And also the way I give the message, I think about it twice or thrice before I zero in on how to give that particular message. You know, like even my anti-drugs message, if I had to make myself sound like a teacher or a priest or a sermonizer, you know, the youth would have turned around and said, hey, go to hell, man.
So you had to find the right voice.
Yeah, the right rhythm to the song, the right lyrics, the right everything, you know, to make, and that same person, for example, be able to groove to this very same song at a party, at a disco. You know.
Let's talk a little about you personally. Your wife, Michelle, is French.
Yeah.
When and how did you meet?
Well, strangely enough, after I spent 2.5 years in France, I met her in Goa. I had to look through all the girls in Paris while she was waiting for me over here, but at least that's what she says. And, you know, she was coming to India to learn the, you know, Moini Atam, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's a dance from Kerala. And that particular year, she decided to stop by in Goa for a week before she went down to Kerala. And in that week, we met.
She saw you playing the flute, didn't she?
Yeah, she did, at a beach party. I mean, at a concert on the beach. And yeah, that's how she saw me.
You're stopping the story. She came up with a memorable line, didn't she? What did she say?
That's right, yeah. She came up to me after the concert and she said, you are my Krishna. I said, well, I've heard pickup lines before, but that's a new one, you know.
But this time you were only too happy to be picked up, in quotes.
Yeah, very happy. And yeah.
You lived together for a while before you got married.
Yeah,
was that a courageous, difficult thing to do in Goa?
Well, Goa can be very open in some ways, very closed in some other ways, and it finally, I think, depends on how open and courageous you are, you know, about doing what you believe in. I mean, if you try to hide, you know, then you're giving the people a weapon, you know, to hit you with. Like if you're trying to fool them into saying, oh, but actually we're married, you know, and
so
they
you
know
were
that you're not
open
married.
About it, you didn't
Absolutely open. I remember when we started living together in my ancestral house in this village called Siolim. Yeah, the first time that we went shopping to the supermarket, or I'd gone, no, I'm sorry, what am I saying? I mean, I said supermarket. There's a small little store there, and I'd gone to pick up a few things, and the grocer said, oh, where's your wife? And he said it in a very sarcastic way, and you know, he thought that I would say, oh, she's gone back to, you know, she had gone back to France. And in front of all the people of the village, I said, you know, she's not my wife. I said, we are living together. There was absolute silence in the grocery store, and you know, things like that make the people respect you. You know, they say, okay, you know, I mean, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, but if I had said, oh, my wife's gone to France, then as soon as I left the store, they would have said, you know, that's not really his wife. They're not really married. Whereas here, they had nothing to, you know, nothing to say anymore. They felt like fools. You know?
Now, you have a new album coming up, and I believe it's very special. Am I right in guessing that a new type of music is going to be introduced this time?
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be, you know, very different from what I've done before, because it's not even pop. You know, that's, you know, what I can say. It's not even pop. It's.
What's the target date for the release?
I don't really know. The release comes from, you know, negotiations with record companies, and I always approach record companies after I have completed my recording. You know, that way I don't have a record company, you know, dictating to me what the music should be like. Once again, I do it, you know, the way I want it to be done.
I do it my way.
Yeah, so, you know, because I've got my own little recording studio in the house, I'm able to, you know, record an album as I want it, and then...
Well, Remo, you've said enough to whet the appetite. We all look forward to the new album. Good luck, and let's hope it comes out very soon.
I hope so too.